Yeah.
I'll call the special regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is being recorded and published on a publicly accessible website, and please respect social distancing when in council chambers. CAO additions, any additions?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to do an update on the Canada Day activities.
Any other additions? Very well, I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Business arising. COVID-19. Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to just do a quick restart update. So we're continuing our efforts on the safe restart within the community spaces. So the outside spaces, our rec spaces are open to the exception of the Spray Park basketball courts and the volleyball courts. We expect to have the volleyball and basketball courts open shortly. Just some additional requirements that we have to meet just based on that particular activity, and we're still working on the Spray Park information to get a good understanding of what that looks like. So no tentative date at this point for the Spray Park, but we hope we can get that open here relatively quickly also. In the meantime, we're working on getting the rec facility open, so that's occurring in the background. We expected that to be a phased approach. Obviously, everything's not going to open all at once based on the various levels of capacity required to meet the different requirements dependent on the area. Pool, for example, a significant amount of work required to get the pool open compared to possibly the running track as an example. So we're in the process of working on that in the background. No tentative date yet, but obviously as soon as we have the ability to open the doors, even if it's just to allow people in the building and utilize the track, for example, we'll do that. In the meantime, we're also working on so Krista Pearson's group's working on the potential different programs, Summer Fun, for example. Krista, if you have the ability to comment on what, because there was a survey that went out to the to families and the like.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. Thank you, Scott. We received 55 responses already, and 48 of them want camp, so that was pretty promising. There are definitely some challenges to it. One of them being staffing. We've heard a lot of feedback from locals and others in the province that are having a hard time getting staff to come back to work, and one of the reasons is the CERB benefit. So there's it's a pretty low wage, right? So unfortunately, it doesn't seem quite as appealing to come back. So I'm a little concerned about that. But on a positive, we received the Canada Summer Jobs Grant, and 4 of the positions for summer camp are being granted with them, and at $14.60 an hour, which is double what they typically provide. So that's quite promising, which might make it a little bit easier to follow the guidelines, because it's looking like we'll need more staff than normal for the ratio per child. And then the other challenge with it is the putting together engaging programming. So of course we've been really fortunate using the climbing wall, the pool, lots of field trips around town, and a lot of things that involve kids touching the same toys, like say for example Lego, or just playing games that like tag. So we're working with BCRPA and WorkSafe to learn the better way to do it, I guess, or the new way. So, but I am still hopeful that we'll be able to run a summer camp. So we're working on it in the background here.
Any questions regarding that from council? Thanks, Krista.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you. Moving on.
Oh, sorry, Mayor, there's a couple more things. My apologies.
Go ahead.
So in regards to council meetings, so this is the last scheduled special regional council meeting that we have planned. Unless it's otherwise it's directed by council or required, our next meeting will be the regular meeting, which is scheduled for June 22nd. So we'll get back into our regular routine of the agendas being published the Wednesday prior to that meeting, and go into that process. Considering the flexibility of the Zoom platform or what the Zoom app provides, we're looking at continuing with that platform to continue to record meetings and post them to our site, our YouTube site, and then additionally looking for some opportunities to allow the public to access meetings virtually if need be. If you look around the room, obviously the room looks much different than what it's done before. I mean, our capacity once we have all counselors available in the room, this is the capacity that we have of the table, and then we have room for five people from the public in this actual room. So some options we're looking at is the opportunity that when we live stream is through the Zoom application or platform to allow the public to access the meeting that way. And so we're just working through those logistics now. The intent for the 22nd meeting is to allow public to, unless council has any concerns, to allow the public to attend, but obviously we would limit to what we have the room capacity at. So that would be at the 5. And what we'll do is probably reach out and ask people who wish to attend to communicate with us prior to that, so we can proactively manage that versus trying to deal with it at 6:28 on a Monday evening if we're at capacity. So we're going to navigate through that as we go, and we're looking at the different options that we can have to allow the public to have the ability to communicate back to council at meetings like they would if they were in person. Also. Sure. So go ahead, Councilor Gurley.
So are we going to continue to get the Zoom invites? I just think that if we continue to get them, then if we have the sniffles or whatever, we can just call in instead of going
Yes.
through the whole process.
Yes,
So those are going to continue to come out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll continue, and that will be the purpose of it. Even though we have encountered some challenges, obviously, with network abilities and things of that nature. The Zoom app, we find, especially if someone's virtually attending a meeting, is much better than someone is calling in and dialing in. And given the fact that there is a likelihood in the future, given current situation, that there's a chance that absenteeism could go up a little bit more, we continue to do that. And similarly, you'll see staff reports will be provided more this way here just because of the capacity of the room. And what will most likely happen is so Krista, when she just communicated, of course, the staff are sitting there with their cameras off, but when they do communicate or provide a staff report, we'll have the video link come up so that staff, you can see them, and part of the communication is visual too, of course. So yes. So as we navigate through that, we'll continue to communicate, but the intent is to do that. We've got a bit of house cleaning in terms of previous council resolutions that we'll have to bring forward to council around how and what. So we're just working through that too in the background. So be prepared over the coming meetings that we'll be cleaning up some previous resolutions or previous direction of council pre-pandemic, and also considering we're looking at the Zoom app at the time when we were going to special regional council meetings. We'll, unless council has any concerns, we'll look at continuing using that platform moving forward. It's much more intuitive and more flexible in terms of what we're looking at doing moving forward, for sure, versus our previous approach on how we were streaming meetings. So, and it gives the opportunity too for residents, like for instance, up Highway residents or whatever, to have the ability, if they wish to communicate, or if there's something on the agenda that affects them, to be able to communicate with council too at that time when we get to that point in the agenda, when the mayor asks if there's any feedback or any questions from the media or from the public, as an example.
Councilor Roper, you had a question?
Yeah, just being that we're continuing with the Zoom for recording meetings, will the regular council meetings, sorry if you answered this already, will the regular council meetings be streamed live, or is this going to be recorded and posted after?
So the intent is to stream them live. We're just working through the logistics right now. So we will, the 22nd, the intent is to try to go live with it, but we have to do some tests and things like that. We know it has the ability to do it. It's just logistically what's the best approach and how do we do that? And then the other component is how do we connect with the public so they have the ability to do that also. There's some different functions that Zoom has that we haven't tried out yet that we're going to work through, but that's the intent, is to do the live stream so that the public has the ability to see it live and communicate or comment at the time.
So, Councilor Roper?
Sorry, is this just the regular version of Zoom we're using? Is there a cost associated with using Zoom? at
Yeah,
this
we
point?
have the paid version.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It's not, because the costs
Much.
are astronomical. We actually have more than one, license, because the limitations, because everyone in the organization was using Zoom, and if you just use a free version, it's a 40-minute, which is fine. You can sign back in again, but sometimes that can become challenging. So once we get out of this, then we'll look at reducing the licenses, but we do have 2 licenses specific to council, one for regular meetings and if required in camera meetings, and we'll figure out how council wishes to proceed with that in the future, because we have some resolutions in the procedural bylaw on the books in terms of that process, which council may wish to change based on Councilor Grewing's comments that, you know, absenteeism could go up, because we will have policies posted around not accessing the building as public or as council or as employees if you are sick or show symptoms of being sick.
So as part of council's efforts to increase public participation, this could be a very big asset, because we have several members of the community on Zoom, and we could engage with the public live at our council meetings. So it's not just that they would be able to watch the meetings, but at the end, we could also talk to them. Mr. Berry.
And delegations, and how we allow delegations to present to council be different also, because as you can see, there's no room for delegation currently. So it depends on the number and which delegations will be, especially at the beginning, recommending that, you know, delegations would occur through that particular application too.
Anything further, Mr. Berry?
No, Mayor, that's it. Thanks.
Very well. Moving on to administration report number 44, Ms. Vandersteen, the business facade improvement program.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Feel like I've been talking to you guys regularly. This program was so NDIT allowed for some creativity with the business facade improvement program after the onset of COVID-19. So the program hasn't been well utilized in the Northern Rockies for a few years now, likely due to the economic depression that we've been in, and businesses just don't have the money to be putting even 50% into business improvements over the last number of years, or that's what we've taken out of conversations. So, and we haven't had any applications for the program in 2020. So the economy working group, based off of the conversations and the business talks program that was just completed, identified that the funds could be better utilized in a totally different program for 2020. So a program has been developed and drafted and sent to NDIT to allow businesses. It takes away the mapping area that has been previously been a requirement of the business facade program. So we went with just any business that requires customers to enter their establishment or their premises to be eligible for a $500 grant to assist them with doing interior improvements that are a requirement of health and safety processes and WorkSafe BC as part of COVID-19. So we have submitted a draft to NDIT for approval and are hoping to get that final approval in the next couple days. The kind of up in the air piece is that we applied for $10,000 this year for the business facade improvement program, specifically because we haven't had that uptake in the program in the last number of years, and we didn't want to be holding a full $20,000 grant that wouldn't then be used over another year, then trying to carry forward and all those things. So, but once these changes came out from NDIT, we did apply for the bump up of an additional $10,000, so to the maximum $20,000 grant available, and we'll find out about that additional $10,000 at the end of the month. So what I'm really asking council to consider here is if we can move forward with a full budget of $20,000, knowing that in the very unlikely event that NDIT does not approve us for the additional $10,000, that we would be able to reallocate some of our existing budgets to cover that funding. So,
Thank you, Ms. Vandersteen. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Gerwing.
Would not-for-profits be eligible for this program?
yes.
Any other questions? I'll ask for a motion. Moved by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Information package of June 3rd, 2020, received for information. New business items, Mr. Barry, Canada Day.
I'll pass it off. Krista Pearson was going to communicate where we are currently with that, so I'll pass it to you, Krista.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you. So just like we were talking about summer camps, Canada Day has to look very different this year as well. Of course, we can't encourage mass gatherings, so that's a really big change for our town. So we've been just talking about different ways of engaging with everybody, and that includes just a few options, like quite different than what typically has been done, so we're not disappointing people that way. One of the things is instead of the regular float, we would do homes and businesses. So you could decorate your home or your business and still be kind of in the competition. So maybe Mayor and a council member would be interested in voting, either going around to the businesses and homes that have said that they're taking part, or else we could have them send in via email or Facebook. So just asking people probably sooner than later to start decorating. They could paint their windows, put up some streamers, flags in the front yard, things like that. And who knows what people could come up with creatively. And then we thought of doing a newscast or a slideshow. So kind of what we love about Canada and the NRM, and interview some different people in town, like say Mavis and Morrow Brown, maybe council, some local, like a nonprofit or a sports team or things like that, and probably do a lot of that, obviously physically distanced, but maybe remotely, even through Zoom, to get the interview, and then work with some locals on trying to put an actual slideshow or a newscast together with some pictures and interviews and some short video clips. Maybe talk about some history and past Canada Days, like 100 years ago and things like that. And then our third idea was doing a Zoom meeting on Canada Day. So at that Zoom meeting, we could sing like we normally do, and ideally have mayor and council do an addressing like they typically do as well, and announce the float winners and play the video, the newscast that we've come up with, and then of course post that up for people to watch at later times. So that's kind of what we're thinking at the moment.
Any questions, councillors? Sounds great.
I have a question, Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Gerwing.
So to me, it would be sad not to have a cake, because like we always have a cake. I don't know. Is there some way that we can have a cake somewhere and people just can go and get their cake or not, or whatever? Just that the cake seems like, I don't know.
So a cake, we could have a cake, we can't serve the cake. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality. It's there's things that we discuss different options. You can do a virtual cake. Yeah, you can do a virtual cake cutting. I mean, Mayor and Council can do a virtual cake cutting, but again, but in terms of having people be able to access a cake, or the public will access a cake, would be extremely challenging for the public health orders, and similarly, the challenge of reducing the gathering, because the gathering issue might be a concern. So,
Councillor Roper.
What about partnering with a grocery store and having them serve individually packaged cake? We partnered with IGA for popcorn. It's been pretty popular, and it's well within the health guidelines. If we were to send people to say, IGA, for example, I'm sure they'd be more than willing to help out and make sure that the community gets some cake in one shape or form. Maybe we could do cake selfies and have people eating their cake sent in, and then include that in your slideshow, Ms. Pearson. Who knows?
What about partnering with the restaurants over on Canada Day? They serve cake free to everyone. Just a Canada Day cake.
Let them eat cake.
Let them eat cake. Anyway, those are some of council's ideas. Anyway, that maybe we can look at.
Thank you.
Was there anything else?
We've been doing some virtual programming, just giving households ideas of things they can do inside, outside, different recipes and things. So part of Canada Day, the week before, would be sending out things that people can do to kind of get prepared for Canada Day and hopefully help us with the slideshow. So maybe our recipe could be a Canada Day cake too, and try to encourage people to make their own cakes. But yeah, I'll definitely look into that, and because that is quite a tradition that we've had. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well, moving on. Dormant Well Reclamation Program. The federal government has announced a Dormant Well Reclamation Program, and they'll be contributing $100 million to the cleanup of dormant wells in British Columbia. This is part of the federal government's COVID-19 START plan. Natural gas companies can apply for the contributions to complete work on dormant wells. The $100 million is going to be released in 2 increments of $50 million each, and priority will be given in the second increment to wells nominated by local governments and First Nations, and applications are going to be closing on June the 15th. I felt that maybe in order to get some additional work in the Northern Rockies, we could nominate some wells in partnership perhaps with some of the oil companies that are working in our area to boost those wells up in priority for the BC Oil and Gas Commission to hopefully get more dormant wells and reclamation activity done in our area. So I guess I'm asking for a resolution from council to instruct staff to reach out to these oil companies to see if there's any oil wells that we can nominate to help them get more of these wells reclaimed in Northern Rockies. Moved by Councillor Roper, second by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Next, Mr. Penny.
So reach out to oil and gas companies and perhaps, the OGC would know every dormant well, I would imagine, that's in our area, so.
Yeah. So maybe, and it has to be done through the BC OGC anyway. So the recommendation has to be done in conjunction with the BC Oil and Gas Commission, so they would know what oil wells are up for this program. Okay, moving on. Northern Rockies Lodge concerns about Northwest Health Services. I talked to Urs regarding the lodge and some of the telecommunications issues that he's facing, and he graciously allowed this letter to be put on the agenda today. And I know that communication up and down the highway has been an issue here for as long as we've been a council. And we've continued to reach out to both Mr. Farnsworth, the Minister of Public Safety, and anyone else we can get to listen to us about connectivity throughout the Northern Rockies. I noticed that Jerry Thiessen, the chair of Bulkton Nechako and mayor of Vanderhoof, brought this up on several occasions when talking to Minister Selena Robinson of Municipal Affairs about this increased desire to get this connectivity going. And it's been highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm sensing that maybe there's a little bit more impetus, both from local elected officials and from the North Chamber of Commerce as well, about connectivity here. One person we have not reached out to is Minister Ann Kang of Citizen Services, and I thought perhaps we should reach out to her and and perhaps write some more letters to the ministers responsible for this, both municipal, or both provincial and federal, to see if we can get some more momentum behind this connectivity thing, because it is now becoming a very big issue in rural and remote areas throughout British Columbia. Any discussion? Any comments? Councilor Roper.
Yeah, I feel like we've been spinning our wheels a little bit on this issue for quite some time. Maybe it's time to switch gears. There is a new internet service provider coming online. They're called Starlink. I'll read you an excerpt from their website. High-speed internet across the globe with performance that far surpasses that of traditional satellite internet and a global network unbound by ground infrastructure limitations. Starlink will deliver high-speed broadband internet to locations where access has been unreliable, expensive, or completely unavailable. I would like to see some information brought to the table about this service provider. It's supposed to be going online by the end of the year. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and possibly for not just our up highway residents, but our local residents as well.
Yeah, I would like
Starlink. Yeah,
I'd like to see that as well. Councilor Gerwin.
When I was in Vancouver, whatever that was last fall, with the BC Rural Health Network, there was a technologist specialist attending that meeting. And I think I included that in my council report at the time, that he says that Starlink is going to fundamentally change healthcare, but also internet services across the globe. Absolutely. So I think it's something that we should definitely be getting more information on.
Councilor Souls.
I think we've been adding our voice to this issue for a long time. But if you recall the communication we had, I don't remember if it was a year ago or a year and a half ago, but we had communication, and one of the takeouts from that I recognized is that an angle that we as a municipality can take that most can't, is that we can make an argument that the service company is not servicing people within our municipality. And that's a really unusual statement to make anywhere, but we should leverage that idea in our communications with the province and with the service providers themselves, simply because PERS is in our municipalities. Like, since when should one part of a municipality have to work under a different criteria than the other part of a municipality? So the Northwest Tel, of course, believes that's a way out in the hinterlands, and they don't see it as connected to the municipality, but we do. And so I think that it's important to focus from that angle. It's a way stronger leverage angle than to just say, oh, please take care of the people way out in the rural part of the province.
Councilor Penny.
Totally in agreement, reach out to Starlink, but this particular case with Urs at Northern Rockies Lodge, he actually has fiber optic cable. It goes through his yard. There's a junction box there, and Northwest Tel has just made it, just unfeasible for them to tap into it. So I think this particular case, without a doubt, the Starlink, because we have lots of other residents and businesses throughout our municipality, but for Urs alone, I really think we need to help give him a bit more of a voice. I mean, the amount of money he's paying for services on a monthly basis, and still the shoddy service that he gets when there's fiber optic cable sitting in his yard, just seems ridiculous. They actually rent space from him on his lot to put their fiber optic junction there. So there's got to be some way that can make it work.
So how about a resolution to have the municipality write a letter to our MLA, our MP, and the various ministers, both provincial and federal, that are involved in communication, and also add in Ursa's letter in that communication as well, so that they can see exactly what we're speaking about. I know this is redoing what we've already done before, and Mayor Hall of Prince George has said that we've been doing this for over a decade, and we've got not very much traction on this, and I guess he was just maybe speaking rhetorically about what is different this time. But I think maybe we do have some extra impetus because of this COVID-19, and it doesn't hurt to just keep hammering away at them. And the more evidence we have, I think the better off we are. Councilor Gerwin.
I fully agree with that. In the letter though, or whatever we end up sending, can we include a historical perspective on actions that we have taken to date? Just to highlight the ongoing situation here.
Councillor Penny.
Also, unfortunate incidents that have happened up this highway should be pointed back out to these ministers that, lack of communication causes for all of us, so.
Okay, Councillor Roper.
Could we find out what the costs would be for ERS to patch into that network? I know we received some information about patching into the fiber optic line, but I believe that was just at a random spot. If he's got a junction box up there, I'd like to know what the process would be to actually get him connected to high-speed fiber optics.
Councillor Souls.
I think that's a good point. One of the reasons, so this is what we got back from them, was their statement is that he has to be serviced from Fort Nelson, because this is where we can service the connections. And therefore, given that he's so far away, it's potentially a really costly operation to service his system. And so that's why I say, well, so what? He's inside of our municipality, therefore we service the people who are inside our municipality. Like, that's the way, I think that's the only way we can get, we have to use some new kind of language ourselves so that they understand that we're standing up for someone who is our neighbor inside of our municipality.
Councillor Gurley.
I think it's important to remember too, he's not just talking about internet, he's talking about phone service in general up there, and how the quality has deteriorated in town as well. Like, how many issues have we had? So I think it's important to remember that it's not just internet, it's basic telephone service that's deteriorating.
And I think the letter that he wrote is very well written, and it does itemize things like that, and it brings out those points that you brought up about not just connectivity and internet service, but also phone service. Is there any other comments? Very well, I'll ask for a motion that we write a letter to moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Yes.
Are we going to get a report on the Starlink global internet system? It would be nice for our residents just to have that information, get the word out, and find out exactly what's happening, what the timelines are, and what we can do with it.
Very well.
Northern Rockies.
You make a motion that we investigate Starlink.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Seconded by Councillor Gurley. All those in favor? Carried. BC Emergency Health Services COVID-19. Councillor Gurley.
Thank you. I wanted to bring this to council's attention. The letter from BC Emergency Health Services, it doesn't say who it was written to, but it came to me as part of our community health plan. And it was from Angela DeSmith. So I wanted council to have access to the letter. I have some major concerns, but I guess I wanted to talk to council about if we want to address this through the community health plan, wait for them to go through their process, or is this something that council wanted to talk about? So just as a little background information, the news release from the Premier's office on April 20th announced that there would be a collaborative healthcare framework for rural, remote, and Indigenous communities, and it included the flexibility so local leaders in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities can adapt it to meet their unique needs. It will be implemented through full engagement with each of these communities' local leaders. I don't know that we have been a part of any input, like if we've been contacted for any input in terms of decision-making process in allocating these new resources. As having the health portfolio, I know that I haven't been. So the framework outlines many things, but it outlines immediate actions to improve healthcare services and respond to COVID-19, which we've talked about before, these new resources, one of which includes improved medical transportation options to larger centers, including flight and ambulance. So when we go back to the BC Emergency Health Services letter, that's what they're addressing is putting these new paramedics in place. And as far as the letter states, and as far as the framework states, that these resources are supposed to be allocated in conjunction with the communities and local leaders. And I would argue that local government is a local leader. So the letter from BC Emergency Services indicates that 16 advanced care paramedics in 8 key rural and remote. So I guess there's a definition that we need about what is rural and remote, because Fort St. John was awarded, which is great that they are getting additional paramedics. I would like to know who the other 7 communities are, because I don't know that we have heard anything about that. The letter indicates that the start dates of these paramedics is May the 29th, and they go until June 18th. And they're temporary and will be evaluated and adjusted as necessary. So again, is that the health authorities and BC Emergency Services? Is there any input from local government? My question included, how have they been filled? Like, have they been filled? Because who's going to be moving anywhere for like a 2-month appointment? How challenging is it to recruit advanced paramedics to rural and remote communities for a 2-month temporary contract? So, like, are they even filled? The letter states that BC Emergency Health Services, in partnership with rural health authorities, will continue to monitor the efficiency of the resource placement currently, and will also consider future alternative deployment locations to maximize utilization that best supports patients' needs. So question is, how does this connect back to the Premier's statement that the framework will be implemented through full engagement with each of our community's local leaders? Seems to leave local government out. Another question that I had upon reading the letter are, where are the additional 6 ambulances located in Northern Health? Like, where did they end up getting located? I would like to know that. Another question is, where are the 7 fixed wing aircraft and helicopters for medical transport located? And additionally, is this just for COVID, or are these, because we've had this question before, is the resource going to continue, or is it just during the COVID time period, whatever that may end up being? And I know that Jaylene McIver indicates that the Community Health Plan Steering Committee is trying to have a representative from BC Emergency Health Services and Northern Health address the monthly meeting to answer direct questions about the resource allocation more specifically. So my question to Mayor and Council is, would we like to address this as a council, or do we want to wait and have it addressed through the Community Health Plan and see what happens?
Well, when I saw your letter, Councillor Irwin, I reached out to Rick Lukes on this, and I spoke to him today about some of these issues that you brought up. It is being rolled out in response to COVID-19, but he believes that this is going to stay in place. It's been extended to September, and he believes the idea is to expand it to April for the COVID-19 part of this. Mr. Lukes is going to be, he said at his next opportunity, he would love to come up and speak to council. So I said that would be a great idea, and if he's in town, I would love for him to come here and present, you know, answer all these questions that you have about the BC Emergency Health Service, what planes, where they are, how many ambulances, and what Northern Rockies' position is, I guess, in all of this. What benefits is the community going to get, and what input do we have into the decision-making of this? So he very kindly said he would be glad to come up and make that presentation. Of course, with COVID-19, there's some issues here about coming up and presenting to council. We could do it probably on a Zoom meeting as well. But at any rate, that was what he said. So I think it's extended out further than just a couple of weeks, and they are filling the positions, and They're in the process, I believe, of getting the planes and the ambulances and everything else to site. So that's all I know on this. But that's not to say that we can't write letters or get some engagement with our health organizations. Councillor Penny.
I'd like to answer Councillor Gerwing's question on whether we'd want to handle this as a council. I'd very much like to see us handle this as a council. Her very questions that she's asked, I'd like to see in a letter. And if we wanted to start with Rick, possibly we might get a quicker response from this person than sending it forward and see what response we get from there. And yes, if he's willing to speak to us directly, that'd be great. And we definitely don't want to wait until a time that he'd be able to come here in person, because we know that that's almost.
He seemed to indicate that it would be sooner rather than later, and I think
Either way, I mean,
mentioned
the Zoom
2
platform
weeks.
looks very good, and you could send us the information, send us the answers, via email prior, and then we can have a question and answer. I'd very much appreciate to get answers to Councillor Gerwin's questions.
I think we should send a letter, and with all those questions that Councillor Gerwin had, and do the meeting as well, so that we have an idea of where they're sitting. Councillor Roper.
Yeah, I was just going to say we should be attacking this at different angles. Starting with the letter is great. Those are important questions that should be answered.
Yep. Councillor Gerwin.
So thank you for contacting Rick. It really highlights for me, your conversation with him really highlights for me that these decisions are being made without any input from us. They're being made between BC Emergency Services and Northern Health. And missing from that is local, I'm trying to be politically correct. Missing from that is citizen engagement, of course, but local leaders as well. And so although the Premier has stated that that's not the way that this is supposed to be rolling out, that local leadership is supposed to be consulted, as your statement really highlights that that's not the case, because the letter, June the 3rd, says that it's only going to be a 2-month appointment, and like there's only like a week later, and now it's going until September. So, and then perhaps till April, and so all of that's being done without any of us being contacted. So I think the other point for me it really highlights is that none of these resources are going to be situated here, because we'd have known about it, I think. Maybe.
I think you're right, and I think it doesn't hurt to point out that the Premier said that local government would be engaged in this, and we've been left off. And so we need an explanation for that. Why are we left off? Because this is what the Premier said. So I think all those points are good, and I think we should bring those up in a letter to Mr. Lucas, and maybe CC Darlene McKinnon as well on this. Because Darlene McKinnon is the Chief Operations Officer. So
I would like to see the letter addressed to her, and then we could CC it to, but also see it to Mr. Zimmer and Dan Davies' office as well.
And I would like to maybe specifically invite Rick Lucas here, because I think there's a benefit in having someone come here to answer those questions in person, face to face with the people in the community that are affected by this. So, and local government, there's our contact, and we would expect something to happen. Any other questions?
Wondering if there's an opportunity to engage with our local First Nations and see if we can get them involved as well, because it pertains to them as well, and there's power in numbers. So if we can make our voice a little bit louder,
yep,
I think that could go a long way.
That's a really good point. Yeah, absolutely, a really great point. Perhaps they would want to even sign on to our letter. Like, I think that's pretty powerful. Yeah.
Very well. I'll ask for a motion then, Councillor Gerwin, that we send a letter. Moved by Councillor Gerwin, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Mr. Barry.
Does council wish us to try to contact Rick to see if he's available also in the meantime, like prior to the letter going out? Is that something that council wishes, or? I just heard some discussion,
Would you like
sorry,
to see that?
about wanting to contact him, the potential presentation, if it's through Zoom or whatever, to answer questions. Is that something that council would like to see? Or would
Councillor
like to-
Gruen.
Can you confirm to me who Rick is? Rick, what's his position for?
So he may not have all the information on the fleet itself. So that would be Darlene, who would know where ground or air ambulance resources are placed. Rick would know more about the ACPs and their capacity and their scope of work and their accreditation and that resource allocation, the people versus the equipment, I guess.
So I guess I feel that I would like the letter to go to Darlene, and then if she feels it's appropriate to ask Rick to come up to whatever, but I think it should go to Darlene.
Didn't he,
Councillor Dolan.
didn't he was here at one
Mhm.
with the council?
Mhm. Yeah.
I think any instance where we can get somebody to come to us in person is good. I think that's fine, writing to Darlene McKinnon and asking him to come and maybe reaching out to him personally to come. All those are good solutions to this. But I think the letter, as you said, Councillor Gruen, should go to the Chief Operating Officer, Darlene McKinnon.
Do you think we should CC the Premier's office?
Can't hurt, the more the merrier. Council in favor of that?
Yes.
Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor to get CC to the Premier's office. Very well. If there's nothing else, I'll ask for motion to adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion.
Moved by Councillor Dolan, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried.